Ian Trottier here for Discussions of Truth. We are at CPAC, and I have a wonderful woman with me. Ladies and gentlemen, Lala Suarez Mooney, and I'll allow her to introduce herself to you, but Lala was in prison in Cuba at the age of 19. So, Lala, please introduce yourself for viewers.
Right. My name is Lala Suarez Mooney. Lala, like you're saying, la la la. And I was put in prison when I was 19. The militiamen surrounded my house, came in, and said, everybody goes to prison.
Is it Havana?
In Havana. And we went, they put me in the women's prison of Guanabacoa. And I was in prison only like 2 months, but I have an uncle who died in prison. My dad was put in a prison in La Cabaña, the entrance, Havana. And I have another uncle who served 7 years of a prison. And then his son went to Miami, rented a boat, went to Cuba, and rescued him. And ransomed him.
So this is what year, Lala?
Well, this is it. I'm 82 years old now.
You're 82. You look great for 82.
I worked on it.
Yeah, good. It shows.
Yeah, this was in 1961. Then the missile crisis happened after that. 1962. Everybody remembers the missile crisis.
Yeah, of course. And then so we're looking at and then when did you make your way to La Florida?
Right. I was lucky. They have put 100,000 people in prison. So
Fidel Castro.
Yeah, Fidel Castro, just to scare us. Anybody.
They charged you with a crime, or they just put you in there?
Absolutely. They didn't even know who I was when the police interviewed me. They didn't know anything about me. So it was just a list they had prepared.
Put you in handcuffs?
Yeah, and my father too, and my two sisters, and
they just knew enough that they knew you didn't support what they were doing.
Exactly. It's a strategy.
You were pro-Bautista, right? Was it Bautista before?
Not necessarily pro-Bautista.
Okay.
Right. My dad was a dean. There was a Villanova University in Cuba, and my dad was the dean of engineering.
Associated to Villanova here.
Yeah. So he was well known, and we were deep Catholics, and we were against communism. So Fidel came and took over, and so it is a strategy. I really want to emphasize that it's a strategy to scare people. Not necessarily that my dad had done nothing against the government, but they put people in prison. They didn't have where to put the prisoners, so there's a fortress at the entrance of La Cabaña for 3,000 soldiers, and they put 6,000 prisoners there. And my dad was there, and he could hear the executions.
Oh, wow.
And he would prepare people, write letters to their family saying goodbye and praying.
Execution by gun?
By gun. And the idea...
Fire squad?
Yep. They said that Che Guevara enjoyed it so much that he had a special window, and he wrote a letter to his father saying how much he enjoys watching the executions and seeing the blood.
And Che Guevara wasn't even Cuban, he was from, was it Argentina?
Yeah, congratulations for knowing that. Yeah. But he was Fidel Castro's strongest man, and he organized all that.
Che Guevara came from a wealthy family, or is that right? So did he bring money to Castro to build that regime, or what was the connection?
Well, it's complicated. A lot of the writers said he was a physician. Some other writers said he was not, that he made it up. Intellectually, he was really a communist. So intellectually, he gave Fidel ideas and really was the one that grabbed the government and made it happen.
Who was Che Guevara influenced? Because Argentina isn't a communist.
No. Intellectually.
Marx?
Intellectually, right.
Okay. Engels and Marx. Interesting. I wonder if was Che a CIA operative?
No. He was from Argentina.
Yeah.
But he had traveled through the world, and he was really a convinced communist.
Interesting. Okay, so Lala, in La Florida, upon moving to Florida, your family prospered.
This is what happened. We're an exception. We didn't go to Florida. We came to Washington, D.C. because my dad was an engineer, and he had a friend that got him a little job at Catholic University working in some kind of scientific thing in the basement of one place. And he worked there, and then he moved up and up, and then he became a nuclear engineer.
In Maryland?
Yeah, in the United States. And then he worked for the biggest nuclear engineering company called Bechtel.
Of course, Bechtel. Yeah, of course. I'm very familiar with Bechtel. Originally, I'm from San Francisco, and Bechtel is prominent in San Francisco.
Right. Well, he moved up. I'm very proud of my dad. He was like a genius. And he had like 5 college degrees and everything. And he, self-taught, became a nuclear engineer. And so we were one of the few Cubans that came directly to Washington. We didn't have the Miami area. But then, when my brother graduated from Harvard and MIT, and he decided...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he decided he was going to run for mayor. He looked at the map and he said, I'm going to Miami. So he moved to Miami.
Good food.
Yeah. Cubans, yeah. That he won.
Pico de gallo, picadillo.
Right.
Una de mis cenas comidas preferidos.
Perfecto. Picadillo has black beans and tamales.
The olive, they have an olivo.
Pork, yeah.
Olive's so good. Onion.
It's beautiful, beautiful.
Las Olas in Miami Beach. Las Olas is a place that I would love to get. Las Olas is on close to Meridian and like 5th or 6th. Las Olas. I'd love to go to Las Olas and get that there.
Perfect. I think food is part of our culture, you know. So I still eat black beans every night if I can.
Okay, so you're back to your brother. So your brother says, okay, I'm going to go to Miami. I'm going to run for mayor.
Right.
I've got a degree from Harvard and MIT.
Right. He decided that he was going to go to Miami. So he ran and won. And then he stayed there, you know. And then some of my other brothers also moved down there. And ultimately my parents retired, and all my uncles and aunts went back and moved to Miami.
And your brother's name that was mayor?
Savior. Yeah.
Okay. And today you also have another family member, so you have a great lineage. Another family member is the mayor, current mayor.
Well, Savior, his son, is the mayor of Miami now, Francis. And he ran for president. I don't know if you saw him.
Right, that's correct. Okay, he did for
a little while. A little bit too early. So, but I think that he's got a future.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's got good conservative values.
Exactly.
He was opposed to the lockdowns.
There you go.
Now you've got a book you've written here. Oh, excuse me, but I'm also missing someone else, and that would be your son.
There you go. My baby. My baby. Uh-huh.
Okay, so tell us about your son.
Well, it's fantastic. My son, at age 26, quit his job in Maryland and decided to run for Senate. And at age 27, he got elected senator in Maryland.
State senator.
State senator, and he was there for 12 years. And he was 27. Everybody in the Senate was like an average of 65, but they depended on him. They were, Alex, how do I vote? You know, when you put an amendment and the bill changes, Alex, what do I do? And he was telling them all what to do. And he was there 12 years. Then he got redistricted. So let me tell you what happened. You're not going to believe it. You know what he did? He moved to West Virginia, and in a year and a half of living in West Virginia, he became a congressman of West Virginia. Only 3 people, I think, in 100 years have done something like that. Because West Virginia, had an opening, and he just knows how to campaign and has very strong conservative feelings and convictions.
So now he's running for U.S. Senate.
Right. Now is a big step. It's the biggest step of his life. Initially, Manchin was there.
Okay.
I give him credit. I think my son scared Manchin. I think Manchin decided not to run anymore. This is his mama's point of view. So Manchin is no longer running for Senate in West Virginia, so there's an empty space. So it's going to run there. And this is going to be a big challenge because he's running against the governor. The governor now is going to run against him in the Senate.
And what's his name?
Justice.
Governor Justice.
Yeah. Now, what my son has done polls, and what he's found out is that people know Justice, know his name, but they don't really like him. He doesn't pay his employees. He has all kinds of suits. They took away his helicopter. He's going to court for many things. And also the delegates did not like him. One of the senators, Tarr, said that Justice was the most self-centered, narcissistic person he's ever met. And they said that they just could not negotiate things. So he said he's going to increase taxes. And Senator Tarr and the Senate said, no, we're going to decrease taxes. So they went against him, they decreased the taxes, and now he takes credit for it. So my son thinks he can beat him, but it's hard work.
And he's already got a staff in D.C., right?
Oh, yeah. Well, what happened is very serious. He has 18 employees as a congressman, but those employees cannot do anything about campaigning. So he has to campaign and has to raise funds, and the opponent is a billionaire, is the richest man in West Virginia.
Is he?
Yeah. But my son knows how to raise money, and one of the things that congressmen have to do, they spend about an average of 5 hours a day fundraising. Did you know that?
Fundraising.
Yeah.
5 hours a day fundraising.
Yeah, an average. There is a professor at Catholic University who wrote a book about it, Professor Matt Green, and this is something that he does, and his people like him, but also is something that many other good, capable people don't run for office because they don't want to spend that much time raising funds. So that's something that needs modification. But at this moment, he needs the support.
So what will your son do when he's elected and he's
then he'll
Senate?
be a senator. Then he'll be 6 years. 6 years as senator. He's very conservative in many of the ideas, but Alex also is very good negotiating. So if he's there in the Senate, then what he does now, for example, he talks to the veterans, and then the veterans say, Congressman Mooney, we want this law changed this way. So he is very good about connecting people and modifying existing laws and listening to them. And also working behind scenes. Like he is very good. For example, when he was in Maryland, there was this senator who owned a garbage company. And he says, I'm a garbologist. I asked Alex Mooney, said, I know a lot about garbage. I want the garbage to pass through these streets. But I have to ask Alex Mooney how to vote many of the times. So he's very good behind scenes also as analyzing the laws and deciding, what needs to be done.
What do you think your son would like to change? And I want to talk a little bit about Lala.
Yeah.
right? But what do you think your son Alex wants to change the most about the country?
Well, he has put laws in, all the time. One of them has to do with coins and money. So another one with immigration. He's constantly putting laws with positive changes. He's very conservative, and he thinks that the power, for example, in the Board of Education and so forth, should come from the bottom up. Should go from the parents.
Great.
And he's really very, very much against communism, so he's very conservative.
So Lala, before we just briefly talk about the book here, on the podcast. So I told you yesterday I started the podcast on Winwood Radio. It's a small little. It used to be a small little radio, online radio studio in Miami. And one of the first guests I had on my show was a woman named Charlotte Iservit. And Charlotte Iservit was working under the Reagan administration, the Department of Education. She'd been appointed. And she was opposed to something called the Betterment of Education Through Science and Technology, program BEST, because she felt, just like Alex felt, that education and the way it was directed should be with the parents and then up. It should be down to the grassroots on the ground level. So I'll send you a book. It's a PDF copy of what she wrote, because she wrote a book called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America.
Oh, my Lord.
She invited me up to do a show in New Hampshire, I think is where she was living, either Maine or New Hampshire. She passed away a couple years ago at 90-something. But I'll send you a copy of that book. You've now brought a copy of your book, Leaving Cuba, One Family's Journey to Freedom. As we wind down, we take a few more moments here. What do you want Americans to know about your journey? What we do know is this. What we do know is that Cuba is the oldest country in the New World outside of Mexico, right? I mean, the two of them are about the same age, basically. Cuba was a very prosperous country and peoples, much like kind of what we've enjoyed here in the U.S.
Exactly.
You and your family found a way to continue that productivity in the United States. What do you want listeners to know about your book here?
Well, the most important thing is to know that communism doesn't work. You have people all over. You have Sanders saying that Che Guevara was good, and the thing is that communism takes away the power and puts it up in the government, and it doesn't work. It's very destructive. So the beauty of America in general, is that the power goes down. Now, when it comes to education, I was a guidance counselor for 16 years.
A guidance counselor?
Yeah, in Fairfax, Virginia. And they're always attacking the parents. But the thing is, the schools don't communicate well with the parents. When I was a guidance counselor, they first hired me as a dropout prevention specialist. And I would do home visits. And I would stay, and I'd go in the football game. I'll be out there. And if the parents were coming to me, I go behind the bleachers and I listen to them. It's called incidental, counseling. So I think, and I also brought outside counselors and training. Like I had a gang, so I brought people who teach the children how to get out of gangs. So I think everybody's blaming the parents. Yeah. They need to work things with the parents.
That's a really, really great point here. And Roger, you've got something?
You're from Miami, right?
Well, I was originally, yeah.
Okay, so this is Pablo Israel Orta. Okay?
Pedro,
would you move over a little bit? He's got a book. He's from Miami.
¿Hablas español? Sí, yo soy cubana.
Yo soy cubano-americano.
¿De verdad?
Because you're done, I'm gonna do all three of them.
okay.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do now? You want me to get up and leave?
You just move over.
Move over.
We're going to do 3 with Pedro.
All right.
because Pedro's wrote a book too, and he's from Cuba.
All right.
Oh, he's from Cuba.
From my family from Cuba. I was born in Miami. My
Oh,
family,
okay. Your family's, yeah.
My family also had struggles.
Ian
leaving Cuba.
Trottier, nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm really not from Miami. I one exception because I'm from DC, but my whole family is in Miami, and I travel to Miami all the time.
If you would, can I just want to put it over here so it's a little closer to him.
Wow.
You're the boss.
Okay,
What?
this looks really intriguing, Roger.
I know.
So,
I know. I think this would be a fun interview.
Fariña, are you
Pedro
Spanish?
Orta.
No, Italian. I have traced some of my lineage to Portugal.
Oh, okay. There you go. We're friends.
So we now are joined, and the camera here, just Pedro, the lens. Lala and I, Lala was a prisoner in Cuba, 1961. She was taken away. She was thrown in prison for a couple months. Her family was. Her uncle. They killed her uncle. But after moving to Maryland, her brother is the former mayor of Miami, and her nephew is the current mayor of Miami, and her son is running for a U.S. Senate seat right now.
You know Francis Suarez?
Yes.
He's my cousin, my nephew.
Nephew. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nieto.
Great man.
Nieto?
Nephew.
No, really nephew. I said it wrong.
Oh, you said it wrong. How do you say that?
Sobrino.
Sobrino. So, Pedro, tell the listeners, viewers, a little about you. Who are you?
My background is, my family is from Cuba. When Castro took over in '59, I had family members that were anti-Castro activists. And one of my grand uncles on the father's side was actually thrown into prison for 20 years, political prisoner. Meanwhile, my grandfather's side, because he was anti-Castro, he actually was thrown in prison, but he was able to get out. But at that point in time, he had to flee the island, or else he would face, either being killed or jail time. So he was able to get out of Cuba first, and eventually my family immigrated, but they burned down their businesses rather than turn the business over. and similarly, I've got family members who had to give up their farms, so they killed their animals rather than to give the animals to the communist country. So I come from a strong, rich heritage of anti-Castro, anti-communist family that paid a price. They came to Miami with nothing and started from scratch, zero. And they had to do hard jobs. My father was 18, didn't speak one word of English. He had to stop his medical education, was a blue-collar worker, a welder. He ended up being exposed to asbestos that 40 years later would claim his life. Family separation. He married my mother in Cuba, but they had reunited 3 years later, not seeing each other for almost 3 years. And the stories go on and on. My grandmother, I remember her crying just uncontrollably one day. And I asked her, what's going on? And she said, my mother died and I can't go to her funeral. Mind you, she hadn't seen her mother in more than a decade. So, it's just horror stories what communism does and how hard it is for the immigrant community to start from zero.
So there's so I started my podcast, Pedro, just a little background on me. I started my podcast in 2016 on Wynwood Radio in Miami. And a contributing author to my book, he's written chapters, is a guy named Servando Gonzalez. And I made the introduction to Lala yesterday via an email. Servando is a historian. He was born in Havana. And I think in the 80s he may have come to the United States, and he's been writing about exactly what I think you've written about in your book, and that the CIA used what happened in Cuba as a template to what they are doing now to the United States. Are you a whistleblower, Pedro?
I am a CIA whistleblower, intelligence community whistleblower, and as you can imagine, after I blew the whistle, they terminated me. And that's a long story, so consequently I've got a memoir that is pretty robust. And
you live in Miami still?
I currently live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. After the CIA fired me, I relocated from the Washington, D.C. area to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay. Would you agree that what happened in Castro's Cuba, would you agree that what happened in Castro's Cuba can happen here in the United States? Would you say that the footsteps perhaps are developing in this country?
What we're seeing are tactics of tyrants, crushed dissent, I mean, that's one of the taglines I use with my story. Destroying dissent to preserve their power. And that's what reprisals against whistleblower is, if you want to call it to its fundamental, basically, core element. If you dare to speak truth to power, you're a dissenter. Even though by law you're required to report wrongdoing, you're actually failing to follow the law if you don't report the wrongdoing. So you're following the law and reporting the wrongdoing. But then what happens is they use the full force and fury of the bureaucracy to beat you and bully you until you either quit or they find a way to fire you. And I walked the reader through that entire bureaucratic beating process. And because I refused to quit. I mean, I was forged in this kind of Cuban background that we don't bow down to tyranny.
You're strong fighters.
So I refused to bow down to tyranny, and I basically just confronted their tyranny, and I dared them basically not to follow the law. And instead of not following the law, they conspired to break the law. So ultimately, they cooked up some patched up plan that I call Salvatore's Christmas Massacre, because they used mafia-like tactics to basically kick me out of the CIA and then put me through a kangaroo court to fire me.
Lala, do you have any questions for Pedro? You have a question for Pedro?
Well, coincidentally, we have several people in West Virginia with similar stories. And to me, it's incredible. To me, it's incredible that this country will fall that way.
Yeah, tactics of tyrants. The same thing we witnessed with communist Cuba.
What did you find? And I'm gonna ask a question here in a moment. But what did you find as an operative in the CIA? And by the way, are you familiar with Are you familiar with John Kiriakou?
Yes, I'm very, very familiar with him.
John's one of the early guests on my show on Winwood Radio. There's also another name I wanted to mention with the CIA is a guy named Ray McGovern.
Yes, very familiar with him.
Okay. Those are two former guests on Discussions of Truth from Winwood Radio. But Pedro, what is it that you found? Peter Pry is another CIA operative that I've had on. Peter Pry, P-R-Y. What is it that you found as an operative? So you were employed by the CIA. What did you blow the whistle on?
There were several stages, and first of all, it was accidental whistleblowing. You literally are doing your job, letting management know, hey, there's something going on here. And then all of a sudden, you kind of get blackballed. So the most important significant part is after having years of experiences working in war zones, knowing what to do, what not to do, and being trained to go to a war zone as a manager, as a deputy chief of base, I go out to Afghanistan in 2014 as a deputy chief of base, and I'm working for a chief of base who, nice lady, got nothing wrong against her, but she was way out of her element, similar to what happened in Coast in Afghanistan in December 2009, where they had sent another lady to be a base chief who was way out of her element and made some decisions that cost her life and the life of 6 other officers. So fast forward 2009 to 2014-15, I'm working for this lady. She's turning the base into a social club on steroids, cooking, baking, wining, dining. We're not really fighting a war. The military is asking us, please meet with us. We need to meet with you. And I can't meet with them because we're so busy doing social activities. She's having us run around this huge base. It's a military camp that, it takes a long time to get places, move around for food or yoga classes.
Sure.
Mind you, we got rockets, that are impacting, indirect fire attack. And one of those times, 10 minutes after we drove somewhere, a rocket impacted.
She's sabotaging the culture.
So, she is creating a hostile work environment. And that right there is an EO liability if I, as a manager, see it and I don't report it. And the worst thing about this all is, it was very easy to solve these problems, but the moment I reported it, it just led to a barrage of reprisals against me that sent me home, blackballed me at CIA. They wouldn't even give me a job. I basically had to take shelter in the Office of Inspector General for the Intelligence Community. And in this entire process, it's just, I find just how the insanity of how broken the EEO process, the IG, the grievance, the personnel policies, it's like they literally just took the law and just slammed it against the law, and it's like the law doesn't mean anything to us. We'll do whatever we want to do. So that's why I call it a deep state run amok. And I'm just taking records, documenting stuff. I'm hoping for resolution. All I wanted was a job, so I can feed my family, sole breadwinner for my family, and they didn't care. So I go to the Office of the Inspector General for the Intelligence Community, and now I'm working on a team that's doing an evaluation, inspecting whistleblower reprisal protections. So I find out that we got just basically ink on paper, pretty paper, worthless laws. They're not even enforcing it. I mean, they're basically daring you to report and they'll do nothing about it. The IGs have no interest in investigating reprisals. It's just a sham. So because I was a whistleblower, despite the fact that there were 3 other whistleblowers in that office, they decided to send me back to CIA. I go back to CIA for round 2 with the devils. That's what I call it in the book. I called it the pit of hell. Shakespeare's quote, "Hell is empty and all the devils are here." So at that point in time, it just snowballed. I had to use the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act process to get to Congress. The IGs are basically flipping me off. It's like, we don't care, we're not responding to you. I send it a second time, no responses. Eventually it just, like I said, snowballs. I get kicked out. They put me through the kangaroo. They fire me. The IG finally responds saying, go ahead, file an ICWPA, Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act procedure disclosure. I file it. Eventually when I file it, they basically tell me, sorry, you've been fired. You have no right to file it. So it's just insanity. But yet, when a whistleblower makes a disclosure against President Trump, the Ukraine whistleblower, the first impeachment, is like all of a sudden the process works. This whistleblower is hailed as a hero, while myself and others like John Kirikou are heralded like villains in yesterday's trash.
So the CIA is, the comment was this, and I want to know if you really agree with this, but this guy, Servando Gonzalez, is an author, is a historian and is an author, and he said the CIA has basically used what happened in Cuba as a template to what is transpiring in the U.S. Do you see, and that's quite a extensive book that you've written here. You've got some comments.
I keep the book focused on what I witnessed firsthand from my whistleblower experiences with showing, so that I don't dive into conspiratorial nonsense. That's one. Second thing is I use sources, 150 citations, footnotes, to ensure that, again, it's well documented. But as far as these tactics, I mean, what we have going on now with the intelligence community is a lack of congressional oversight. The House Permanent Select Committee
lack of congressional, very important.
And the Senate Select Committee of Intelligence, they're really not doing oversight. So it's almost like these agencies tell Congress what they want to tell them or not tell them, or half-truths or lies, like spin it around. It's like they completely botched a multi-billion dollar program. And the response they gave to Congress was, we hired the wrong people. When in reality it wasn't that they hired the wrong people, it's that the senior managers botched the program. So they take no accountability. They kind of just sugarcoat it in a way that Congress basically buys it. So Congress is not doing their oversight. So these agencies know that they can get away with, whatever they want to get away with. I mean, you can go as far back as the torture report, the torture investigation, Senator Feinstein, who led that, and, Brennan, spying on congressional computers, so forth. It's like they stonewall Congress. They don't tell Congress what Congress needs to know. Congress asks for documents. They don't give them the documents. If they give them documents, they give them like a teaser. So these are kind of similar tactics as far as you can label them covert influence campaigns. We're going to shape the narrative. We're going to let them know only what we want them to know.
What do you think? Do you think there was a purpose of this woman in Afghanistan? Was there a reason why this person went in there and changed the base?
Part of that is this DEI push, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They were putting women in charge at times that were questionable characters. I remember speaking to an IG officer one time that they were doing evaluations, and every time they did an evaluation on a department, the most troubled departments sometimes were the ones led by women. Now, I'm not trying to knock women down, but if you start promoting people because of their gender rather than on their qualifications, because they do have a lot of qualified women. I work with plenty of them, and I praise some of them in my book. If you just promote people based on DEI, you're creating a woke culture, and you cannot expect excellence if you promote incompetence.
Well said. Lala, leaving Cuba again, because I want to get some words in from you as well, and some commentary from you as well, and then Pedro, we'll go back to you. But what is the main message here? Again, folks, this is Lala's book, and it's available on Amazon?
No, it's at YouTube. If you go on YouTube, you see Lala Mooney, Leaving Cuba, and it's through a non-profit in Iowa, and they ask you for a contribution, or they can send it to you for free.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. The message is similar to his message that communism takes all the power away and concentrates it in scaring people.
Centralizes the power.
Right. And scaring people and just keeping total control of the people and not respecting any of their human, rights. But it's a little bit different because I think you're talking about a system that's not working. And we're talking about it, but could work if there were changes, and it needs to be refined. This is just a total wrong approach to running a country, and it's just running it down to the bottom of it.
And something that came to my mind, Pedro, is you're talking about a lack of congressional oversight on the CIA. And the CIA, of course, was that a creation after World War II, right? The precursor...
1947, the National Security Act, Truman set it in motion, created the CIA. But ironically, 2 decades later, Truman regretted, he penned it in an op-ed, that he formed the CIA.
Did he?
That it has failed to meet, the intent. Similarly, Dwight D. Eisenhower, as he was departing office, told the CIA director, we're left with a legacy of ashes from the CIA. He regretted also that the CIA had been formed.
I didn't know that.
And then Kennedy came in and said he wanted to splinter to 1,000 pieces, and his brain got splattered into 1,000 pieces.
Right.
Plus, Kennedy, what he did in Cuba, the failure of Pedro Pig's invasion, was totally the fault of the CIA.
That was the CIA.
Yes, there are books out there now. Roger Stone has a book, and there's others out there who have basically strong circumstantial evidence of the fingerprints of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the CIA, and a few others that basically took Kennedy out.
The CIA, the early, just throwing in some different pieces here that might be of curiosity. The CIA, the early office of the CIA was located in New York. Is that correct? Do you know that?
Actually, it was the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
Actually, inside Washington, D.C. Eventually, it became Langley in McLean, Virginia area. But its precursor, its birth was the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. Now the
OSS, right,
that's
OSS.
Wild Bill Donovan. And there are lots of connections to New York with the CIA as far as its founders.
And they've centralized the Central Intelligence Agency. They've centralized intelligence.
The idea was to centralize the intelligence collection and processes so that instead of having disparate different forms of intelligence coming in and not being connected together, that it would be connected together. Because, unfortunately, 9/11 was a failure in that centralized intelligence process. Because we did have intelligence indicating that there was something going on, but, you had collection from NSA, collection from FBI, collection from CIA, but apparently there was interagency rivalry is big within the intelligence community. So that's why post 9/11, the Intelligence Reform Act that formed the Directorate of National Intelligence was supposed to try to fix this again, another time. But still, these interagency rivalries do continue.
Okay. Do you have any more comments about
Well,
the
in
JFK?
in the specific case of the CIA, yes, because the CIA, the plan to go to Cuba was originally planned by Eisenhower, who had experience in war situations. Then Eisenhower left, and Kennedy got selected, and then they changed a lot of these strategies. One of them is they changed the place where they were going to land in Cuba to another place was a disaster, the Bay of Pigs. And also all the other changes that Kennedy did destroyed the whole thing and caused it to fail.
And there's more to it. The reality is it was the CIA driving Eisenhower to do this, and then in the case of Kennedy, it was the CIA trying to drive this operation in part to fail to create a war where the military would have to be called in. And that's where Kennedy said, wait a moment, I don't want to start a war with Russia.
So if we go back to Eisenhower, you said something that sparked my interest. If we go back to Eisenhower in his farewell address spoke about the military-industrial complex. And you're saying the CIA, theatrically almost, the theater they created, or they meant to create a war.
Well, what we saw happen back then continues this day. Take, for example, the Ukraine impeachment dilemma and the phone call. The National Security Council is extremely powerful, and it's embedded with a lot of career bureaucrats. Usually when the president needs some kind of foreign policy, whether security, defense, or foreign relations, the national security gets involved. So they game the system. It's like, okay, we're going to come up with 3 policy proposals. We know the president's going to reject A, B, so he'll take C. So they'll do some kind of crazy, funky proposals with A and B, and they'll propose C, which is what they want, in which the president by default is kind of fed into accepting that option C.
I want to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. I think that was given at his press club in New York at the Astor. There's an Astor Hotel.
I don't remember exactly when it was said, but John F. Kennedy said that.
Yeah, and then he was
like I said, like his brain was the thing that was splattered into 1,000 pieces.
Was Fidel Castro, because I think Fidel Castro was educated partially in the U.S.?
I don't know exactly all his education, but I do know this. Fidel Castro came to the U.S., wanted to be an actor, and he failed, or they failed him, and he left bitter. So he went back to Cuba bitter at his failure to become an actor in the United States, and that played into his anti-American attitudes.
Okay, and what do you have here? What's this? Whose is this? Is this yours? This is this yours, Lala?
No, I don't know what this is.
What is this information?
I have no idea.
Fraccionamiento Arcia Tavor Luis Abraham?
Somebody
You don't know what these are?
No. These must have been dropped here.
Wow, very interesting. Okay, I thought that was that was yours, Pedro.
That's okay.
All right. Fascinating things, and I want to throw in something here. Not that it's political. It shouldn't be political. Americans have. There's a guy I like to listen to. He's a former guest on my show. His name is David Icke, and he was a former reporter for the BBC, I think in sports, and then he began exposing corruption in the UK. But he says there's nothing more liberal. There's nothing more liberal than the U.S. Constitution. But what they've done is they've weaponized some of these words for us, right? So we're categorizing. They're categorized using some of these words to categorize and create division. But anyway, so the point that I was getting to is that we have a dichotomy now politically in the U.S. of a left versus a right. We simply have that, and it's been created for over 100 years. But in Miami, particularly during the Trump, during the lockdowns, right? So during so this is during the Trump administration, there was a 100-mile long caravan for Donald Trump, because let's just say the left, they like to say, oh, Trump's all, these are all the white supremacist types of people, right? The racists, the white supremacists. Wait a second, hold on. There's a 100-mile long, documented by Miami-Dade police, 100-mile long Cuban, basically, right? Cubans and Venezuelans. Parade for Donald Trump against the lockdowns in Miami. So what a wonderful opportunity it is, not only to have this precious woman speak, who was locked up in Cuban prison in 1961, and then able to move to the U.S. and prosper politically, and certainly in business as well, and then you. A product of parents that went through something similar in that, and going into the CIA, going into the heart of American intelligence and saying, no, you're corrupt. No, you're not doing it right. Yes, you need congressional oversight. So bravo to both of you. Pedro, some final comments for viewers. What do you want them to take away? This is available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon. Paperback is probably your best option, as well as ebook. Hardback is a little bit harder to get. Books A Million appears to be supporting me with the
awesome.
hardback.
Yeah.
And it's also available Apple Books and Barnes & Noble Nook. I mean, the takeaway is my epilogue. Who will speak for you when they come looking for you? Winston Churchill has a quote, and the quote states, "The malice of the wicked was reinforced by the weakness of the virtuous."
There you go.
It's this lack of inaction, of just
quiet,
sitting idly, being quiet, not doing anything, that it's empowering and emboldening the left to go unhinged and just trample the laws of the land. And, leftist members of Congress who try to take us down a path of tyranny. And so we, the people, need to rise up, use our powers as voters, elect responsible members into Congress, and Congress needs to step its game up. They need to stop their political theater, their showmanship, and their grandstanding. If they want to be just actors, go to Hollywood. Stay out of Washington.
I'm going to share a thought, and I'm trying to remember. When I started the podcast, I had somebody local to Miami that had gotten my number and was in the CIA and exposing a story. I don't recall the person's name, but I commend both of you for doing what you do and putting your name and your face and voice out there to really sound the alarm. Because we're here, we're happening. We've seen it more than. I think we've seen this socialist incursion more under Joe Biden than we did under Obama. Go ahead.
Liz Truss is right. I mean, it can take only a decade for us to completely just devolve into a communist-type tyrannical government with an economy that's totally broken. Look at Venezuela. In 10 years, they went from oil prosperity to disparity and poverty to the point that people were eating dogs and cats and whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
I traveled to Colombia, South America, and they make crafts out of Venezuelan, the bills, Venezuelan pesos.
Really?
The actual craft that they make has more value than all that paper money in it. Their currency became totally worthless.
Yeah, it's totally worthless. Yeah, and the UN is wanting us to eat insects, evidently. Did you hear that?
No, I haven't.
The UN wants men to stop eating meat and for everyone to start eating insects. It sounds like we need to get out of the UN as far as I'm concerned. That's so good to me. You're laughing. You like that?
I'm laughing. I mean, the Chick-fil-A.
The Chick-fil-A
logo.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. About 20 seconds left. Lala, Actually, we'll let the lady have the last word. Pedro, some final comments for viewers and listeners.
Read my story so that you can see what a wicked government will do to you if you dare to challenge it, and why we must rise up as we the people to hold them accountable.
Lala, please.
This is a real life story with real life details of what is happening in Cuba. Thank you so much.
That was great.
Yes.
I mean,
You're
I enjoyed
very
that.
knowledgeable. What did you study? Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to the University of Oregon.
Okay.
And I studied sociology.
Incredible.
Tiny, okay.
And
I know.
love to read.
It's like this. You can
You are
sit here
amazing.
for a certain
That's
amount of
very
time
sweet.
just talking
I used
about
to
your
be,
book,
you
but
know,
I
the
figured,
guidance counselor.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is just
And I
incredible.
analyze people. The amount of knowledge you have is fabulous, and your ability to analyze it, it's really great.
I mean,
Congratulations.
we're going to do all
That's
these
quite a
single
comment.
interviews
That's
all
quite
day
a
long.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes it's
Absolutely.
more effective.
I'm going to send you the PDF
Okay.
from Charlotte
Yeah,
Eisen.
as
It's
far as
called
I'm
The
concerned,
Deliberate Dumbing Down of America.
I'm done,
Oh my
unless you
gosh.
want
It's
more.
about 900 pages.
All right.
Quite meticulously
Right.
written. The other thing
And
I
then
want.
I can send it to my brother Xavier.
Yes, please.
Yeah, because he's a very intellectual.